Lace 'em up, let's start the show. We're digging in with Tripp. 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 We're digging in with Tripp today, yeah.
It was a lot of fun last night to tape a Digging In episode for the first time in front of a live audience at the Hibernian Irish Pub here in downtown Raleigh. Thanks to the great people at Hibernian and Voodoo Ranger. We're going to dig in momentarily and discuss, among other things, the upcoming trade deadline with the Athletics reporter, Sara Civian. Our pilot episode with a live audience, thanks to everybody for coming out. It was a ton of fun. Hope to do it more often. Juice Force. When you think about Voodoo Ranger, this is a new, exciting libation under the Voodoo Ranger umbrella. Juice Force, it's a bit of a Top Gun spin-off, fruit-tinged, fruit-inspired Juice Force. You should really try to consume that and do so responsibly. Heavy-duty alcohol content, so make sure that you sip it responsibly and wisely. Thank you, as always, to the great people at Voodoo Ranger. Please continue to take a look, sojourn over to digintripp.com, our merchandise line. A lot of very exciting items on our ever and growing merchandise line at digintripp.com. Please rate and review our show on all audio platforms as well as YouTube. Especially, we would love your feedback of what you think candidly the first time we've gone in front of a live audience. Without further ado, let's slide on over to where we were last night. What a riot it was. Let's dig in. Thanks to Voodoo Ranger at the Hibernian Irish Pub with Sara Civian.
Well, it's great to have you as this type of pilot, Le Commandant, here in the first ever live audience show. We're going to talk about the upcoming trade deadline. It's next Monday. But before we do that, why don't you give us an assessment of where this team is at, in your view, at this current State of the Union for Sara Civian?
I mean, usually when I start to nitpick about things and zoom in, it's a good sign that the team is really good. I mean, the team has the best point percentage in the NHL, and it's been consistent, right? I think Justin Williams taught me how to look at streaks, right? How do they follow up if they lose 2 games? They're going to win 5, 6, or 7. So it's kind of like you look at the trends, and they look really good. And then the thing that makes me kind of hopeful for them is that they've been fine without Tony DeAngelo, and then when he comes back, no matter what they do at the deadline, that's kind of like an acquisition, you know? So I think they're good. What do you think?
Well, I've been thoroughly impressed, and, Sunday, the loss in Pittsburgh, I referenced a Game 5 loss back in 2009 where they lost 2-2 in the series at that point to New Jersey, 1-0, and I got on the bus after the game, and Jimmy Rutherford, my longtime general manager, president, my boss, you left him alone after losses, a lot of times after wins, but I texted him and I said, Jimmy, did we just lose the game to win the series? And he said, it may be that. And you know what happened in Game 7 with UC Jokinen tying it, Eric Stahl the shock at the Rock, and I was thoroughly impressed with, even in losing the game against Pittsburgh Sunday, that was an incredible effort in a losing cause. So if you had to pick 2 or 3 things, whether it be individual, facets of the game, that have struck you the most so far about this Hurricanes group, what would it be?
Well, what comes to mind, you mentioned the Pittsburgh game, Sebastian Aho wants to win. Like, he's just such a competitive guy. He's always been that way, but I feel like this year he's in more of a leadership role, and it's just kind of coming together. And then the penalty kill. My friend Dom Lucian, who does stats at The Athletic, actually changed his entire model to reflect the Hurricanes' penalty kill because he doesn't give penalty kills credit, because usually it doesn't make that much of an impact. But the Canes has been so good, and they feed off it so much. It's insane to me. And I think obviously that's a microism of Rod Brind'Amour, the way he plays and kind of what he instills in this team. And then he puts this stars on fearlessly, and then there's so many shorthanded opportunities. And I know it's silly to be obsessed with the penalty kill, but I do think it really it shows who they are as a team.
Do you think, you're from Boston, when Boston won the Cup, about 10 years ago, they didn't have a very good power play en route to beating Vancouver, but their penalty kill was elite. Do you think you can ultimately win the Stanley Cup? You want both, but do you think you can win the Stanley Cup with a stellar penalty kill and not the power play?
Well, it goes back to what Sebastian Aho said when I asked him, what is the key, what's the secret to this penalty kill? The goalie. It means you have good goaltending, right? So obviously Timmy Thomas, pretty good.
Yeah. I would argue that the kill, Freddie Anderson, for my money, and I've tried to make this point, is not just a Vezina candidate, but he's a Hart Trophy candidate. Igor Shesterkin is getting more of a buzz. But when I look at Freddie or Antti Raanta and the story that he's been recently, I feel like over the course of the year, the kill's been that good that their best work has actually not been shorthanded, which is sort of the exception to the rule, because you're right. Most often, your most important penalty killer is your goaltender. What did you think at the time? You had a threesome here last year in Peter Mrazek, James Reimer, no particular order, Alex Nedeljkovic. What did you think at the time this summer of all three moving on and the decision to sign Freddie Anderson and Antti Raanta?
I mean, I get the benefit of hearing from some of the front office and stuff that helps me understand the decisions. I know that looked kind of crazy to people at the time, and then I looked like a homer when I'm like, actually guys, Ned's only played, 39 games, and then you kind of look at his repertoire, and I know the Canes love him and they want the best for him, and he's a great guy, but it is true, if you're trying to win a Stanley Cup, you might want somebody with more experience, and he wanted more money with less experience. So I understood it at the time, and I wrote that, but I'm not going to do a victory lap until they get out of the first round, just because obviously Anderson has that monkey on his back. I do think it's kind of nonsense when you think the Maple Leafs' past issues, it's been more struggling to score than anything else, but everybody hyperfixates on the goalie. So.
And that's where, the way Ranta's played here, really going back prior to February 20th and beating Pittsburgh for the first time, I think Freddie's going to flourish. And I look at other factors, and that he felt the brunt in Toronto.
Yeah.
But the fact that you have trust in two goaltenders, full trust, players, coaches, the organization, the fan base chanting Anti's name after he shut out Colorado, that's, for me, the biggest development in the last many weeks in Carolina. Saturday was just a radio game. What a terrific presentation for the market, ABC, and in the game against Philadelphia, from the Caniac Nation. I took a look out at one point on press row, and it struck me because you were having it look like a nice moment with Tony DeAngelo. How would you assess? I've always made it clear, I focus on hockey. What's been your assessment to date of Tony DeAngelo as a Carolina Hurricane?
Are you meaning on the ice or off the ice?
Anything that falls into the category of hockey. Okay, well, you're not in the locker room. I know how much you missed that.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, so I'm saying if you haven't been able to be in the locker room, and on the plane as you often have been in the past, but just anything that falls in the category of his role, his performance, your impressions as a hockey player as a Carolina Hurricane.
Yeah, it exceeded my expectations. I'll be the first to admit that. And I thought he was going to be good, but 40 points in 43 games, 9 goals. I mean, for $1 million, you're kind of replacing Dougie. I don't think you get a better, obviously there's a reason it was $1 million, but I don't think you get better deal than that in the NHL right now.
What's the part of his game that struck you the most?
I think the fight. I feel like that is something he probably had conversations with Tom Dundon and Rod Brindamore about, like, this is your last chance, and if you mess up, whatever, like, keep your head down, but he's kind of fought for the team. And I think that stands out, not just in the way he's actually challenging people to fights, but I think the effort,
Yeah, it's a good call. He's had 2 fights, but I like how you expounded upon that it's not about those actual fights. All right. What have you observed so far? There have been a couple of one not so significant today, Colorado deal maybe creating some cap space, and Manson coming over from Anaheim to the Avalanche. what have been around the league? What's your assessment and your strongest impressions of the days leading up to the trade deadline, or even months so far?
I mean, everyone's messed up with cap space right now, so you wonder what deals are going to get done, who's going to do three-way deals. I think we're going to see a lot of underwhelming three-way deals. But I said that, and then like Jost's getting traded, you got Manson obviously, but there had been a quietness after Toffoli. I thought that was going to be the domino. Maybe Manson actually is, because I guess it's really a defenseman market right now. I thought Manson would have been a good Hurricane, but at the same time, look at what they're giving up and look at how much cap space the Canes have, and it's pretty difficult.
Just to make sure my numbers are correct, how much cap space do the Hurricanes have?
Good question. I think they have less than $1 million.
I believe actually Chatfield going to the American Hockey League gives them. I think it gives them more. It's somewhere between, with Chatfield going to the American Hockey League, and I think there's full trust that he can play.
Yeah.
I believe him going there gets you as high as 1.6 million.
Yeah. I can't do this math.
Well,
I failed math in college and dropped
shockingly,
out.
I do this for a living, but I had to take the SAT 7 times, but my math was far better than my verbal.
Okay, Harvard.
Well, I had to take it. I had to go to an SAT specialist so I could, and hockey got me in, just to get my verbal high enough. My math was actually okay, which is shocking. Okay, the Hurricanes right now. If you were Don Waddell, here it's Tuesday, trade deadline next Monday, what would you be thinking about?
Chychrun. I don't. Obviously, Don's really good at not succumbing to, it's the trade deadline and I have to do something. And we all get wrapped up in that. I know I get wrapped up in that. And then I did my Who Says No mailbag. I don't know if you guys saw that, but there's like 200 responses, and they're all, half of them are reasonable, and some of them are kind of ridiculous. And it's just, we have to stop and think about, as fun as it would be, and I'd get the page views, I love that. Just kind of think about what you're giving up and what you're getting. Are you doing something just to do it? Like Chychrun, I think, would be great because he has 10 goals. He's like leading defenseman in goals, and I know he's out 2 to 4 weeks, but I think the Canes need goals during the playoffs. That's been an issue. So I'd look for people that can score goals, but I'd be hesitant to give up too much as it goes. I just know I covered the Bruins the season before I got here, and they traded their first round pick for Rick Nash, and it didn't work out. And it's just like, okay, then you don't have a first round pick, and you don't make the cup. So I don't know.
I want to dive into a bunch of these things. The first thing is, I make a point. Now, I'm just the announcer. I've never been digging in. Maybe I pay a little bit more attention, but Glenn Wesley years ago would come up to John Forsland and I, and he'd say, what scoops do you have today? And I'd be like, Wes, my job as an analyst is not to search for scoops. My job is to call the game based on whatever the team is that's presented. I'm not an insider. I'm not trying to be one. I have no desire to be one. So it's a bit of a different hat for me. But now getting ready for this and some things I do on the radio, I've investigated a bit more. So a guy like Chychrun, I would want to watch for probably 15, 20 games. Watch every one of his games with the Arizona Coyotes. A Ben Sherratt, I'd want to do the same thing. He had a great run last year. What level is he playing at? So I'm sure you're watching Chychrun. Aside from the goals, what are his strengths? What are his weaknesses?
Well, you've seen what the Coyotes have done this past month. I think he's been leading that charge. I think he's pretty elusive. And then you think about, it's like when goalies leave and when defensemen leave the Canes, or when they come to the Canes, it's like you see there's an impact in coming to the Canes that does a lot for them right now. And it's like, I think it's because of this. I've talked to Brett Pesce about this a lot because he was never really an offensive guy until Rod, but Rod encourages them to kind of jump the rush. And I think a guy like Chychrun could only benefit from that kind of system.
Do you think, now I'm going to get systematic for a second, the way the Hurricanes play, and Rod Brindamore listens, so he'll kill me if I give away trade secrets. He's my former dig-in guest. It's the demand, and its defensemen relish it. They get excited about it. But there's a big adjustment to the way Carolina plays on the blue line, period. Because you have to pressure so much in all three zones. There's nothing whatsoever that is passive about it. So when you look at it, like I go back to the Stanley Cup year, Doug Wade in January, and then Mark Recchi because of Eric Cole's injury. at the trade deadline. I don't know if Jimmy would have made that deal no matter what, but the Cole injury necessitated it. Those two great players, Mark in the Hall of Fame, Doug Wade is always a candidate for the Hall of Fame. It took them until after the Montreal series in the first round that they almost lost to adjust. So would you worry if you were to acquire a defenseman, if you're Don Waddell and the Carolina Hurricanes, that there would be a tardy adjustment because of the way the Hurricanes defense is required to play that is different from a lot of other teams?
That's a good question. I would say yes if they didn't already have 7 defensemen, right? Because you have options here, and that's how I know Don Waddell likes to create his teams. It's kind of, you always have somebody to rotate in or fall back on. So I'd say you got to take a risk to win the Stanley Cup too. Like you've seen Tampa Bay; they don't take like the biggest risks in the world at the trade deadline, but they definitely do a little bit of a gamble, you know.
I would say that you can argue that both ways, because if you look at Tampa took a risk in their acquisitions for both Stanley Cups. Prior to that, the Washington Capitals were extremely quiet. The St. Louis Blues, granted they were just trying to make the playoffs, they were extremely quiet. So in recent memory, we've seen it both ways. Now Washington really, and I think this is relevant, Washington when they won in 2018, they made a decision, Brian McClellan, really to stick with their core that had underperformed or just hadn't gotten it done. They had gotten it done in all sorts of regular seasons. So maybe to revisit that question, do you have to take a risk? Because there are arguments both ways as to whether or not it works. For Tampa, the argument's in your favor. For St. Louis and for Washington, it's not.
Yeah, I literally change my mind on this every day, and I think it's because, in all honesty, it depends on who's available. Does that person fit in your system? Can you vet that person is a player's player who's going to win the cup with you guys in the locker room? Is it a fit? I think that is a question that's most important.
I want to talk about chemistry because it comes into play here. You know, if you were to say acquire a guy, let's just say Jacob Chikrin, who you mentioned as an example. You mentioned 3-way deals where you can perhaps move some money that is cap advantageous to fit acquiring a player like Jacob Chikrin under your cap. But in all likelihood, you'd have to move out a current player on the Carolina Hurricanes roster. So I put on your general manager's hat. What do you do?
I mean, the fourth line is looking a little crowded. I don't want the job of picking who goes, but I do think you have to look at whose deals are coming up, what you're going to have to pay, because that's going to be a mess coming up, especially if Kokoniemi gets re-signed, which there's rumors about that. So it's going to be a little clogged. Maybe you trade somebody who's a pending RFA or UFA, or maybe you don't. And that's where I don't envy this job.
Okay, so you're saying RFAs would be a Marty Necas, who's still so young. The two big UFAs are Vincent Trocheck, Nino Niederreiter. And then that brings me to, what I'm constantly thinking about, because having been around this, it's such a privilege, the successful Hurricanes teams over the years. Chemistry is everything. And it's tough to locate when you don't have it, Sarah. And when you do have it, you have to make sure you don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, and it's tough for you, you're at a position of disadvantage here because you haven't been around the team based on COVID like you would have been in the past. But what role, with the clear-cut love that Rod has for the chemistry of the group, and being fearful of disrupting that, what I guess degree would that play in your formula and your decision-making process?
Yeah, you gotta kind of hear the players out on that too. I remember in the locker room clean out after the conference final year, Pesci was like, it would break my heart to see anybody gone, and that was such a special group, and I got to see that group up close and personal, and maybe this group's like that group. I, again, obviously don't know that much this year, but you got to get a feel for that, absolutely. And you don't want to bring somebody in that's not going to elevate that and enhance that.
I want to go, because I've sort of shifted my viewpoint. I'll be very blunt. I am comfortable with the group as is. And I didn't know, for me, after the loss against Florida, because I thought that was a tremendous barometer of where you were at. And even though you just about won, if you're Carolina, won that game in regulation, I thought Florida, in my view, outclassed Carolina on that night. But that's one night. It can happen. It was a magnified game. So I said to myself, you got Nashville coming up the next 2 days later, a physical team for those that are worried about is Carolina, are they hard enough to play against? Well, you won a big game if you're Carolina 2 nights later against Nashville, and then you go in. The first game against Pittsburgh was more of a skill fest because there wasn't really much familiarity. And you won a game against a stellar Pittsburgh team who at the time, in the 2 months prior, was right there at the top of the heap, best teams in the NHL. So that really gave me a lot of belief of how this group responded. And so I started to say, you always are looking at ways to improve your team, but that made me a lot more comfortable with this particular group. What are your impressions of that?
Yeah, and then you think about D'Angelo coming back. It just seems like that might be the trade deadline acquisition when you really think about it. They're close to the cap, blah, blah, blah. They don't have their first round pick. It's like, what are you actually going to get? I know Chychrun's going to be kind of coveted around the league because it's kind of a scarcity thing, right? He's one of the few people available, and then you overpay for him, and you might regret that looking back.
I'm not saying, I'm always looking. I mean, you have your due diligence.
Yeah, it's
But
tough.
here's my big shift that's happened here in the last several weeks. I would have said that the area that you keep pointing to that I would have looked at is the blue line. But in the last several weeks, Ethan Bear, I'm still trying to get a real good feeling of what Ethan is, but Ethan's playing excellent hockey. So let's just go through it. Jacob Slavin, Ethan Bear.
Trade Jacob.
Yeah.
Am I right, people? Trade Jacob Slavin. I'm just kidding.
Okay, so that was a good one. Slavin, Bear, and I'm not even, who cares if I mess up left, right. Shea, Pesci, Ian Cole, whether it be Jalen Chatfield, Brendan Smith, Tony D'Angelo, okay? Jalen Chatfield, can we both agree that he has gained the trust that he can play in the National Hockey League?
Definitely. Has a little snarl to him, too, like that.
Okay, Brendan Smith, before he got hurt, was he playing to his strengths and making a difference, especially in those hard to play against games as a physical defenseman?
Yeah.
This digging in. No stone unturned. Give me your honest to God opinion.
I don't know if he's fast enough.
Okay.
I really like Cole, and I like Smith too, but I don't know if you're winning a Stanley Cup, and you're going to make him play a lot of minutes. And I think that might have been an issue of just he's in and he's out, right? So he started to play really, really well when he had been in for 2 or 3 games, but I think you need to give him that kind of time. I don't blame him. That's really tough.
Okay, but what I'm getting at here is that I've always thought that you need borderline Civvsssy, 8-9 defensemen.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with your Tampa model. 8-9 defensemen who you can really trust to win.
Yeah.
Every team that wins has to stay healthy. Luck is a huge part of it, whether you're active at the deadline or not. It's a huge part of it. So Carolina, in my view, with the emergence of Chatfield, Bear playing much, much better, you have already that depth. I wouldn't have said that a month ago. And with regards to, when you desire Chychrun's goal-scoring production, what did it take, 50 games or something like that for the Hurricanes as a group of defensemen to surpass the production from last year from their blue line? And that was with Dougie Hamilton, who I've always been clear has been a stellar, elite, you can count on it, regular season, offensive defenseman performer. So you've not only individually and cumulatively filled the void for Dougie's departure way before the 56 games of the last year's abbreviated season. You've surpassed it. So that makes me say, do you really need to add production from the blue line?
You don't need to, but then you look around at kind of everybody else, and you see what the Avs are doing, and they might get Claude Giroux.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you need to specifically add production on the blue line, but I do think you need to be aware of what people are doing to get better. And I do think when you say, I wouldn't have said that this was an issue a month ago, I don't know if the consistency is there enough for me yet. I think I always want more insurance, right? But I don't want to give anything up to
story of 32 teams.
Yeah, exactly.
And so now I'm moving to where I have shifted. So I would have pointed to the defense. Now, and I've just said I'm comfortable with the group unless the deal makes sense. For cap reasons, for draft pick reasons, all of those things. Chemistry first and foremost.
Yeah.
But now I look up front because I'm trying to truthfully figure out where Marty Necas is at this stage of his career. Seth Jarvis is going to have a terrific career, but he's a rookie, so you want to make sure you're not in a position where you are putting him in an important role that you're counting on him. So I've actually, like I said, moved to, if you can address one area of your team, it's actually the forward group. How do you respond to that?
I completely agree, but I don't know if Rod's going to budge with his guys. You know what I mean? Where is he going to put somebody that comes in? That could be a second line winger, third line winger. That's my concern. And I don't think that's not a knock on Rod at all. I think it's great that that's why his guys go so hard for him, because he goes hard for them. But I don't know if I worry about what the lineup would look like in the forward. I feel like he's way more lenient when it comes to the defensemen and changing things up. I don't know. What do you think?
What I think is, if it's the area that I'm looking at, if again you're doing your due diligence in talking to teams around the league, if for all those factors, and there's a bunch there, because it's not like the old days pre-salary cap where you're just making a deal and you don't have to worry about cap restraints and where things fit in. I also too remind myself, because I've seen teams pay a massive price when they start to sour on young players. You have to be patient.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be patient. You have to be patient again. So, all I'm saying is, generally speaking, is I've been so encouraged, impressed with the defense across the board, and that includes the depth, that I'm comfortable with it as is. I look at the forward lines, and it's truthfully, if Necas isn't going, and you don't want to put too much on Jarvis. Right now, the last couple of games, the fourth line has been their best line, bar none. Like when you look at Lawrence, Kokaniemi, Derek Stepan, congratulations to him on a dazzling 500th point in the reaction from the fans. It just, when I look at the top nine, and again, I'll say it once again, the last time I'll say it, I'm okay, I'm more than okay with the group, but that would be the one area that I would be looking at, but thinking about all the things I just mentioned.
Right, but I think Derek Stepan should be in the lineup all the time. I loved what Rod said after that game, that he has handled being in and out of the lineup better than anybody. That guy's a true gamer, and I think he's going to be low-key huge during the playoffs, but I worry, if he can't even get in the lineup consistently, what are they going to, they're going to have to take somebody out and trade that person to get somebody in, and that's going to be tough, right?
Who would the person be?
Exactly.
You just got a beautiful hard hat.
I did.
Yeah, you did.
I did.
For those watching on you want to show it to those watching on YouTube? Do you
I
have
do.
it right there?
Yeah.
And while you grab it, we're digging in here, Civvsssy. I have to ask. Yeah.
Who's digging in?
So I have to ask you, if put on that hard hat.
I'm ready now.
Okay.
We're going for the tape.
So if you're Don Waddell, knowing about this very impressive chemistry, knowing about cap restraints, if you had to move somebody out, who would it be?
Well, what are we getting? That's tell me who they're receiving in the trade, and I can tell you who I'd give up.
That's a fair point. Fair point. It's hypothetical. Claude Giroux.
What's his cap hit right now?
6 and change, so between
All
6 and
right.
7, I think, or it might be high. I don't. We'll check on that.
Okay, if cap
I don't
was
think
an
he's.
issue.
I don't. Yeah.
Breaking news.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I think who would get the thing. I don't want to single people
Philip
out
Forsberg.
and be mean.
Another similar high cap.
Okay, I think
You'd have to move somebody out.
I'm sure people would think because their UFA is Nino and Trocheck, but I think they're last playoffs when they were hurt.
I agree.
The Canes didn't have secondary scoring, and you saw that. So I don't think you move them out. I don't want to say Natchez. I think he's great, and I think the best is yet to come for him, absolutely. But I do like knowing what I know in the background, kind of the negotiations with his agent and the Canes. I think that's going to be tough. Going to be a tough road ahead. And I think if Kotkaniemi there's so many what ifs, right? It's a domino effect, but there's going to be too many centers or too many potential centers. And if you can get a big return from someone like Natchez, I think why not do it? Because I'm thinking realistically here, like everybody wants to trade a fourth liner for a first liner, but I don't know how much the Canes would be able to get it done with their fourth liners unless it's someone like Jarvis, but I don't want to give up on him.
Oh my gosh, he'd be untouchable for me.
Yeah, me too. Exactly.
Truthfully, when I look at it, Nino Niederreiter's playing with more pace than he ever has in his career, which should, when the game ramps up in the playoffs, that gives him a chance to be more effective. Vincent Trocheck hates to lose as much as anybody on the team, and he's got that irritant side. Going back to the hilarity with Brad Marchand, that aside from being a superstar, he's got that. You need that to win. Mm-hmm. So even if hypothetically you were to lose Trocheck, I'm not parting ways with either one of those guys.
Me either.
And I've already made my point about Natchez that you have to be patient. Yeah. Do I think his growth has been stunted this year? Has he left me wanting more? Yes. Mm-hmm. But I remind myself he's still very young. Do you see him ultimately as a winger or a centerman?
Center, absolutely. I remember I went to Charlotte and interviewed him a few years ago, and it was really interesting. He was like, he's such a great sport, and he was like, what, I get it. Like I'll play wing right now, but I do think I'm more comfortable as a center. And obviously, he didn't say that with like any ill intent or anything like that. And I know Vellucci coach Sagan and people like that, he started out on the wing, then they became centers. That's another thing, you have to be patient. You saw it with Aho too. There's tons of situations like that in the league, and I'm not saying this as I think Natchez is bad or you should give up on him. I think he'd be the one realistically getting you a good return from a smart other GM who thinks patience is a virtue, which is true. So I just look at the clog of centers that's about to happen, and I'm like, well, you could get something good for Natchez, who then you wouldn't have to pay him next year if you're paying Kotkaniemi. But that's the thing, who are you paying? It's like a blurry picture right now.
See, I would argue that you're making good points, that you still, and I don't know what's going to happen because there's only so much room at the end.
Right.
But Kotkaniemi, he has a very, he has a bright future.
Yeah, he's 21.
He's had a heck of a year, and scoring the number of goals he's scored in a fourth line role. 11 goals in that role is really impressive. For the most part, something that I was a little bit worried about, he's played with consistent bite. But as he's still developing, Jordan Staal has been super last couple of months. But Jordan Staal, even for a player that, and I'm so beyond thrilled that, he's a true hurricane and he's appreciated like his brother was in his prime. He wins the Stanley Cup. But at some point, Jordan Staal, 10-year deal as you get closer to the end. As all players do, one would think, I hope not, he's going to fall off. So you could technically bring back Trocheck, who's a righty. Those other guys are lefties. And Natchez, as you mentioned, is a righty. But it would fit if the money ever worked, because it would give Kotkaniemi still time to develop, and not knowing if Jordan Staal is going to continue to show the sea legs that he has, really since mid-January. So for me, you could still keep everybody, but if you want Natchez to go to the center ice immediately, then it becomes more difficult.
Yeah.
Why do you like him at center? Why do you like him at center?
I like him at center because a center is very valuable, and if you can.
No, but just style of play.
Style of play. He's a playmaker, but he's been really good at shooting, like not unexpectedly, but like I do like that Rod will start some of these guys out on the wing, kind of to develop that shot, and you see that with Natchez now, because he had been branded, I guess, as a playmaking center who can make great passes and make so much space on the ice, and. I love watching him on 3-on-3 overtime, because you see that and you wonder what he could do as center in that situation. What
do you think about, do you see it coming? I thought, we're in March. It was actually March last year that I thought by far he had his most complete month as a National Hockey League. The first game in Florida, he didn't get a puck out. And, Florida came back. He sat for a while. Florida came back. They had the lead. Rod gave him a chance to respond, set up the tying goal. You mentioned 3-on-3, scored a dazzling 3-on-3 goal. That was, I think, the first game of March, and went on to have a terrific two-way March. That was awesome. So when you look at what you want from Marty, what a wonderful guy. I mean, they all are, but he's a wonderful guy. In terms of being a two-way winger or center, where's the growth still being so young there?
Yeah, I think you got to be patient, and every player, almost every player, goes through a little slump, and it's hard when it's your contract year, right? Because everything's magnified, and then we're talking about, I don't think I'd be saying this if he wasn't a pending free agent. So it's just like, okay, what could he get the Canes in a return if they have to negotiate a contract with him coming up and they'd rather not? That's the only reason I'm saying that. I think he's going to be great, and I think he needs a little more encouragement. I don't know. It's tough on the line. I feel like the forward group is so clogged right now, and maybe shipping someone out is the move, but it's tough.
Yeah, and again, he's going to be a restricted free agent. He's on an entry-level contract, so it's a small number. I am a big believer. I will tell you, Civvsssy, until proven otherwise, I don't know if it's going to happen. But I will say, I am a big believer. If players bet on themselves and flourish, they should be rewarded. If they bet on themselves and things don't go well, they should pay a price. That's why you either choose to take an extension or you don't. But until proven otherwise, teams around the league have proven that they'll pay. Now it's different, when you're a restricted free agent, obviously, gigantically so from being an unrestricted free agent. Let's take a break. How about some questions from the audience? And if you do have them, can you talk decently loud so we can make sure we hear you? Don't be shy, please.
Chris Proctor, what's up? You look like you got a question.
I don't have a question. Sarah taught me about hockey.
I did.
Literally, it was like I was doing a podcast. We were on our couch, though, and she was teaching me about the game. I'm reminiscing a little bit. I love being here. I love what you guys are bringing. I don't have a question. I got called
in like the depths of the pandemic, when I wasn't allowed in the arena. Chris, me and Abby lived together, obviously, and
Abby Labar Down is here.
Oh, sorry. So me and Chris would be on the couch while I'm kind of doing my job or trying to, and Chris is like, what's icing? What's the stoppage? What's the media timeout?
Podcast.
I know.
I was asking the question.
No, I loved it. Kept me on my toes because I stayed focused when I wouldn't have. So.
And now he thinks he knows more hockey than I do.
Yeah, of course. That's how it goes.
And Chris Proctor doing a fabulous job. Just extended congratulations with the NC State Wolfpack football staff.
Let's go, Chris.
Yep, I am a Wolfie. I don't shy from that. I support Duke and Carolina when I can, but being in the building, knowing that Rod Brindamore overachieved with his wife Amy, and she's a Wolfie. I'm a Wolfie. So, okay. Then we've got some shyness here. Do you have some questions from your mailbag?
I do.
Yeah, pull
I don't
those
know
out.
if any of you guys did the Who Says No thing, but I do have some here. All right. Speaking of the devil, would you say no to Natchez, Reese, and a second rounder for Chikrin? I'd say no.
I would say a firm no. Yeah.
Oh, I thought there was going to be an F-bomb drop.
No, I don't. I just, again, I've stated what I have about my feelings about the defense right now.
Yeah.
I thought Jamison Reese had a really encouraging training camp and preseason before he needed surgery. When I look at what he can become, in my view, it's the same type of player that I enjoyed so much for many years, a drafted and developed Hurricanes, Brock McGinn. So, that I would, and I hold Natchez to such a high standard, but I remind myself each and every night when I drive home after a broadcast or fly home that he's still very young.
Yeah.
2017 pick. And you don't know, the end of an entry-level deal, You don't know about the pressures and how that's impacting your play. Like everybody always said, that Andrei Svechnikov, it got to him last year. Well, there's a good chance that's true. But you know how close I am with Andrei. Did he ever say it? Did he ever actually say that I was worried about my impending contract situation? No. Not once. So, like that. But it's worthy speculation. All right. How about before we take another one? That's a good one. In the prospect world, Carolina has a ton of good prospects. Who would be the guys that you would covet, and the guys that maybe in the right situation you'd be willing to move because there's not going to be room for enough of them down the road based on this team should be good for a considerable period of time?
Well, I want to say Kevin Wall because he's my Penn State boy and he just got all Big Ten honorable mention for being great. So go Kevin Wall, but not really. Jarvis seems untouchable to me. I think he is a special player, and I think what you told me that Braden Point told him that, you're going to make the team, like that is, I feel like the respect of your peers means so much, and I think Rod really likes him too, and I feel like he'd be just great here. I want him to stay here. Suzuki, kind of strange situation. I know he's been sidelined with some really unfortunate and bizarre injuries. Maybe a change of scenery would actually help in that situation. I don't know. I'm not married to the idea of keeping him around. I'm not married to Reese either, but I don't mind keeping him either. I know you want Drew to stay here too.
I do.
I think when I see him play in the NHL, it's like not that much of an adjustment. And I know I've never played in the NHL or professional hockey, but he sticks out as someone to me that can be called up and play in a fourth line role and not sweat it. And I think people like that are important to have in your system.
And when he scored, you're right, when he scored the 2 goals dramatically in his first 2 NHL games, he played he can play the wing.
Yeah.
Now he's been properly developed this year because he's going to be a centerman. So there's another center. And he's, with regards to the right kind of people, chemistry, you have an abundance of them. I've biased because his dad was my captain in college and his mom got me through school, but he is a winner. So I agree. The one thing I would say, I agree with you on Suzuki. That being said, it's amazing how with prospects you go from being the flavor of the month to it's almost like it's passed you by. I thought Suzuki had a really progressive, showed major improvement in training camp and preseason. He caught my attention, and he's just struggled to stay healthy. But you're going to have to, at some point, it's a position of strength. There's just not enough room for these guys. So that's why I ask you, some of these prospects, you're going to have to think about moving them because there's not enough room at the end here that will be good for them and good for the Hurricanes.
Well, it's the same thing as a Brock McGinn when you trade him and then when he re-signs somewhere else and he gets a better deal and you're happy for him and he's doing well. It's not everything has to be a win or a loss. Sometimes things work out mutually.
You want that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly
it's not like anybody hates anybody that wants they want traded. It's just sometimes you want it to work out elsewhere.
I would argue to say, I'll tease this because the great Bobby Clark is going to follow you next week, and I taped it this morning. And Bobby Clark said to me today, which I thought was unbelievably impressive. He's the guy that traded Rod Brindamore, okay? And he and Jim Rutherford had a bunch of deals. He traded for Danny Markov for Justin Williams. And Sammy Kapanen was really good for him after being good here. But Bobby went out of his way to call Rod Brindamore as fine of a leader as there is in the National Hockey League, and he was very candid to say, I didn't know, because he was quiet in Philadelphia, that he was playing behind Lindros, that he would flourish like he has. I mean, from one of the greatest players of all time. I thought that was unbelievably candid. But whether it be a Bobby Clark or a Donnie Waddell, I've talked to Kenny Holland, he just dug in about this, Jimmy Rutherford. You actually want a trading partner that it does work out for both teams, because you know what that does? That increases the chances of being a trading partner again.
Exactly. I think that's a really, really underrated part of the trade deadline and trades in general. And then it's I got a lot of, like, in my Who Says No mailbag about Seattle. I'm like, do you think Ron Francis would trade with the Canes or no? Is that not a non-starter, but would it have to be a really, really good trade or what? Because that immediately came to my mind.
My immediate response would be that there can never be any type of emotion involved in a trading partner. You know, it has to be purely a professional situation.
Yeah.
As I'm having a cup of coffee here, I should be having the great stuff from Voodoo.
Come on.
No, well, I got to be sharp. But you know, I have always believed in the adage, resentment is like pouring poison down your own throat. The only person it gets is the one who's drinking it. So, you know, like I do think with regards to trades, there can be zero emotion. And that's where sometimes general managers, you know, try not to get too close to their players. You know, they want to create a family-like atmosphere, but in case they ever have to make a really hard decision, you know, you don't want emotions to dictate the day for that very reason. What else you got in the mailbag?
Let's see. We got... Yeah, speaking of Seattle, Bear, a 2022 second and 2023 third round pick for Mark Giordano and at 50% salary retention.
Okay, so I would have said prior. Well,
Voodoo Ranger
I love Voodoo Ranger.
To be silent.
I love it. Love it. Okay, so I would have said a month ago, I would have said truthfully, Mark Giordano, right shot defenseman, plays a hard-nosed game, has been deep, has never won, which was a huge part. All the guys, whether it be Brindamore, Wesley, Hedican, Wade, Ray Whitney, all the guys that had never won, and that's a huge asset when, you know, 'cause to get over the hump. And I would have said Giordano would be perfect for Carolina. I would have said that. Now he makes a lot of money.
PK too.
It's already top PK, but I would have said perfect. But what I've seen, as I've mentioned in the defense since then, I don't see that as a trading partner anymore.
Yeah.
What do you see though? Because Ethan Bear played his junior hockey in Seattle. Okay, Ethan Bear is playing very well right now. You know, he was playing well before his COVID diagnosis in November. Mm-hmm. When you assess Ethan Bear, where do you project him to be? Because that's a big part of this. He's on his game right now, and I'm thrilled for him. He's a wonderful guy. When you project, again, putting on that general manager's hard hat,
all right,
where do you project Ethan Bear?
I think it's tough, and you could see his underlying numbers too in Edmonton when he was playing with Darnell Nurse as opposed to some of his like third or second line pairings. Like obviously playing with Slavin or Nurse elevates you. He's got to find a way to be the player that he can be on any line, which is obviously easier said than done, or any pairing. But how old is he?
Ethan Bear, Admiral Fact Check, our producer.
25.
Hamilton.
Okay,
25.
yeah, he and defensemen don't round out to 30 you're in your peak. So I think he's going to figure that out, and I think it's a great place for him to figure it out here. I don't think you should trade him, and I think, especially in this system, it's been obviously rough. I feel like people don't understand how hard it's been. These players act like it's not hard, and obviously they want to be cognizant of what the struggles other people are going through in their lives that have it worse or whatever, but it's hard to play hockey in a pandemic, and I think once you kind of get your bearings straight and establish yourself more in like this kind of new life, I guess it's easier.
You don't have to put that beautiful hard hat on again if you don't want to, but I want to ask you another question that I'm excited about.
Okay.
Analytics. Okay, so I look at analytics as not a competing force with the eye test, video, you know, seeing what your gut says. I look at it as a supporting force. It's almost like the three branches of government in our great country is checks and balances. And so let's say I love a guy, but his and you know what? I'm your assistant GM. You're my GM. Okay?
Oh man.
Yeah, Civvsssy, I'm reporting to you. Okay? So let's say that, you know, I love a guy and you you look at the analytics aren't any good, or vice versa. How do you view the importance and the chemistry and relationship between what your eye, your gut, your experience tells you and what analytics tells you?
You need both. And I think it's funny that there's this whole debate and fight. I think it shows both sides to be clowns. Like, I feel like you don't use, like, if you don't use everything that's in your toolbox, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And I think Tulsky is brilliant, and he's so good at the analytics side of this, and it's a toolbox Waddell and Dundon use. And I think Tulsky's very aware of that. And then there's kind of cocky people on both sides that are like, oh, the analytics mean this, and I'm going to have a hot take about this, or the eye test means this, and they push back on each other when it's like we could all benefit from using everything. And I do think people that are good at explaining analytics will let you understand that it's kind of about what they see in the eye test. Like my dear friend Allison Lucan, who just filled in for JT Brown on the, with John Forsland on the Seattle Kraken broadcast, is amazing at analytics because she applies them to real life. Like she'll watch a game and she will see some guy standing out there and she'll, okay, I'm going to look at the analytics because this guy stood out to me on the eye test. And then if something significant in the analytics pops up, it does. But I think it's also ridiculous when we ask players about analytics because they don't have, it's about us evaluating them. They don't have to constantly evaluate themselves. It's like, you shoot the puck that way, it's working, keep doing that. Like, you don't need to know your Corsi or anything like that. But I do think agents, GMs in negotiating contracts, and then folks like us can use analytics.
I think you said a lot of very interesting stuff there. My first reaction is, you said cocky people on either side. I will tell you that in my 25 years, in pro hockey, between, my 2 years playing and now broadcasting, the most impressive people and the legends of the game that I've met in all the different capacities, none of them have ever been cocky. They've always been looking to learn more. Former Dig-In guest, Scotty Bowman, he's asking me questions all the time, always trying to ascertain more information so you can make the best quality decision. Yes. Eric Tulsky and I were at Harvard, I think at the same time. I should have been at his room because my grades would have been way better. But I appreciate it with Eric, and we've gotten to know each other quite well, is that he will educate me, really, for dummies on analytics, but he doesn't push his numbers on me. He provides me with, another box that I can look at with my desire to be better.
Exactly, that's all it is.
But he doesn't push it, and I really appreciate that. And when I dug in with Donnie Waddell, Don is very close with Rick Dudley, who I think is one of the most humble hockey greats. He's now in Florida, but he said it best with regards to analytics and in comparison, like doing your due diligence, analytics, data, eye test, whatever, instinct. If they don't measure up, you know what it means? Work harder. Work harder until it does measure up. And I thought that was brilliant. Rick Dudley's made me an infinitely better announcer, and no ego. So that's, what do you think about that?
I agree. If you're digging in, it's going to show on the analytics and on the eye test. But not always, like, that's the thing too. Like, you can't use anything as an absolute. And we all have opinions, and that's okay. We can disagree about hockey players, and the world will turn on.
It ain't okay, it's fabulous. And, it's as we get close to finishing here, I have, and this is heartfelt, I have always appreciated you. You're my friend because, you've supported me, and that's meant a lot. And professionally speaking, and I'm okay, totally okay for different opinions. Like say for instance, I think that we probably have fallen differently on how we feel about Dougie Hamilton versus Tony DeAngelo. I'm just hockey versus Tony DeAngelo. And you know what? That is still TBD. The proof will be in the pudding.
Exactly.
But it doesn't impact our professional or personal relationship, and I am terribly appreciative of that. we're sitting out here. It's beautiful. It's in Raleigh. You know me, I'm a pure Michigander. I go to Michigan after the season. I'm proud to be a pure Michigander. I never would have thought that I'd end up in Raleigh, North Carolina for well over 2 decades now, and I love it. I love the area. I am so proud to call myself half Michigander, half North Carolinian. What are your thoughts on the area?
Yeah, I love the people. I've met the love of my life here. I've met some of my best friends.
It's already love of your life?
Oh, you know,
He's
but
a
he's
pure
a pure
Michigander.
So I don't know if that counts.
No, that's good.
When I look back on this time in my life, I know it'll be like one of the the most bittersweet things in the world. Like the way I will say the way Raleigh people take you in is like unlike anything I've ever seen. Like folks like you showing up to this means the world to me genuinely, and it's been a surreal experience. Definitely. Is it? No. Okay. Yeah. This is what we're all talking about. I did a tweet that this is not a real city. I would never do that. I think we could do better with the infrastructure, right? Don't we all just want to go out and rally more?
Then we got to put on our hard hats.
But that has nothing to do with the people. I love the people, and I love the commitment to the Hurricanes. You know, I had a different perception of here before I moved here that was perpetuated by the Bruins, the Leafs fans and everything. Like, oh, it's a small market team and people don't care. But then I got here and people were grilling me and they cared so much, and it might not have been everybody watching it on their TV or on a sold out game, but the fans that hadn't had playoffs in 9 years would ask me the most detailed questions I couldn't even answer. So I'm they're real diehard fans, and that means a lot to me.
Good stuff. Final question. My fine producer, Adam the Admiral Holtzman, am I correct that Sara is the second reporter that's been on Digging In, Elliot Friedman the first? I believe that is true.
You're 2 for 2 on Jews.
Well, hey, listen. I'm going to tell you right now. You just met the love of your life. I have almost married a couple of Jewish women, and I'm telling you, I would have overachieved. Let me tell you.
Queens. And Elliot's a king.
No doubt about it. So, final question. You're the second after Elliot. All reporters, and they're all doing their best. They're trying to be as good as they can be at their craft. Digging In is defined differently to different people. When you think about how you define what makes a good reporter from a Digging In standpoint?
Honestly, answering the questions that fans are asking to bridge a connection with fans and the team. And that's different for everyone. And I know some people, it's objectively telling the story, and that is fine too. And I think, okay, I'm getting an echo in here. But the evolution of a reporter is really interesting to me, because there are some hard and fast reporters who are here to get the scoop on the news and be the scoop person. And you said you're not a scoop person, kind of inferring that it's sort of my job, and it is.
Yes.
But I think it's kind of taken on a new role too, I love when I ask on Twitter, maybe what are the stories people want me to write or whatever, and the answers are what's everybody's favorite song in the locker room, or what is up with this person's family, or I heard this about what's their favorite restaurant. I don't know. And I think that stuff matters too, and I think it's all about gaining a connection to the people on the team that you root for. You want to root for somebody, and I know there's serious stuff too, but I do think it's hockey and it's not that serious at the end of the day.
No doubt. Do you I miss Shane Willis, who's here, being my teammate. That's what I think Rod is enjoying coaching, because it's the closest thing to being in the fight. But you'll never have the same, that you're in the bunker together. Reporters, would you say, do you feel a sense of teammates and supporting one another, or is it Charles Darwin, survival of the fittest?
Secure and confident reporters, and a lot of that is men in my industry. The secure and confident ones, yes, I feel that 100%. The ones that maybe feel like they have something to prove, I don't know about that. So it is interesting too, because it's a competition and it's like a cutthroat industry, but I don't see it as that way, and nobody will ever force me to see it as that way.
Sara Civian, aka Civvsssy, you've dug in. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for being here. Civvsssy, thank you so much. And hey, it's going to be a very interesting trade deadline, and hopefully we've set the tone.
Oh, we better.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks so much for coming.
I enjoyed that very much. And to repeat myself, I have a tendency to do that. Thank you, Sara Civian, for joining me on our pilot live audience episode of Digging In. Thank you to everybody that came out. That was a ton of fun. The energy was great. Thank you, as always, to my presenting sponsor, Voodoo Ranger, and specifically, really think you should check out Juice Force. Juice Force gets after it like Top Gun did. It's a Top Gun theme. It's under the Voodoo Range umbrella. Significant, pungent alcohol content for an IPA. So make sure that you consume it wisely and responsibly, but it is dynamite when it comes to elite IPAs, Juice Force. So thank you as always to Voodoo Ranger and everything under the Voodoo Ranger umbrella. And we hope to do more live audience dig-in sessions at some point in the future. Continue to check out digintrip.com. Hopefully you like some of our merch. And on all shows, and in particular this one, that it was a pilot live audience deal. Rate and review our show on all audio platforms as well as YouTube. We'll talk to you soon. Next week, I've already taped it. You're not gonna wanna miss it. The legend among legends, Bobby Clark, digs in. That will air at some point next week. Stay safe until then. Enjoy this terrific hockey, and we'll talk to you soon.
We're digging in with Tripp today, yeah. Today, yeah. Today, yeah. Today.